Matthew, I'm sorry, I'm getting this here, brother. It's just my fault. I didn't have it on yet. Matthew, chapter number 6. I think the song was fitting for the content that we're going to look at tonight. I think it'll work well, as it always does. And so but we're going to just look at one verse. We'll look at several things in it, but you won't find tonight's message to be complicated or anything like that. It's just going to be real simple as we look at the one verse and I think we're going to look at one verse. That's all that I've sort of really outlined, even though we could look at the other verses that are contained there in the end of that chapter as we finish it out. But we'll follow the Lord's leading as I just put down 3 or 4 things that I pulled out of this verse that I hope would just sort of be an introduction to this last, what we would see here, the last statements in chapter number 6 of the Sermon on the Mount, all right? And so here we are in Matthew chapter 6. You can stay seated. The verse that we're looking at tonight is verse number 25. Matthew 6, verse number 25, the Bible reads, "Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat, or what ye shall drink, nor yet for your body, what ye shall put on. Is not the life more than meat, and the body than raiment?" Father, we would ask tonight that you would direct us in our preaching and in our teaching. Help us in our study of the Word of God to be diligent students tonight. And I pray that you might help me, fill me, and use me. I want to be your vessel, used of you. And so give me the physical and the mental and the spiritual strength to do the work in which you have called and commanded and commissioned me to do this evening. I'm leaning on you, not on my own understanding. I need you to direct my way and to direct my thoughts and help your people to be spiritually minded and to put aside the things that may want to consume our thinking over these next few moments, and to just really have our thoughts upon you so that we might be able to grow and to learn and to be what you would have us to be. The days are short, and we don't know how much time we'll have on this side of eternity, and every day we're reminded of that, and so we want to make the most out of the time in which you give to us. For no man knows the day or the hour when the Son of Man shall appear, but we also do not know when our time to be called home could be. And while we all would like to have long life and would not want to go by way of grave, we will look forward to the day when you come and to call us home to glory. And so even now, and even so, come quickly, Lord Jesus Christ, in whose name we ask all these things. Amen. How many of you, and please don't, I'm not trying to set you up here. I'm not trying to mess you up. I really was and was not, and was kind of back and forth, and sort of just decided to hand that out. And I think it maybe will help us by way of illustration. You'll be your own illustration tonight. And how many of you put something on the piece of paper? All right, go ahead, put your hand up. Let me see your hand. Hold it up. How many of you put something on the piece of paper? All right. And you say, I didn't have time to do that. All right, maybe you didn't put something on the piece of paper, but maybe you at least looked at the little sheet that we gave you, and maybe you're thinking about 1 or 2 things, all right? So just being real honest about that. You don't always have to put things down on pen and paper, but you're thinking about a couple of things. I want you to be honest with yourself when you were writing on that paper. Don't be dishonest with yourself. It's between maybe you, the person sitting next to you might see it, maybe not, but the Lord knows, and so be honest with yourself. It's okay. Do that every once in a while. Ask yourself, what am I worried about? What am I thinking about? What's consuming my time? And then I hope that I'm not going to criticize you. I want to help us tonight from the Scripture. Can we do that? And so we'll maybe take those thoughts that we have or that we wrote down, and maybe it will give us some direction. So you're really, on that piece of paper, carrying the title of tonight's message. And so I've entitled verse number 25, and honestly, as we would go down through most of these verses, we'll probably carry the same title. I don't know, but on these verses, it is, what are you worried about? That's the question that Jesus has put before not only us, but those that He is preaching to here in this Sermon on the Mount. Interestingly enough, you would find that as we have come into chapter number 6, we see the Lord teaching us about our private life. When He would talk about your giving of alms, while we may do that publicly, it's really a private issue, right? We don't let our right hand know what our left hand is doing, and vice versa, and so on and so forth. And then He went into your prayer life. And so He talked about your giving life. And then He talked about your prayer life. Again, a private area of our life that we think about and talk about. And He spent much time talking about that. And then we developed the thought about forgiveness. And we just commented, didn't spend a lot of time on the fasting portion of these verses. And again, that's a bit of a private part of our life. We don't go around, He said, you don't disfigure your face, but you do these things before the Lord, and the Lord which sees you in secret, that will then reward you openly, right? And so we've seen all of those, but we've come to verse number 19. And in verse number 19, He begins the thrust of the rest of this chapter when He would talk about laying up for yourselves treasures on earth. And we spent much time developing where is our heart taking us, and what direction are we being pulled in. And where our treasure is, there our heart is going to follow our treasure, right? Where we're making those deposits, our heart is going to be pulled in that direction. And then the light of the body, and the darkness and the light and all of that. Last week, no man can serve two masters. You're either a slave or a servant. You cannot be both at the same time. You can't be a slave to something while serving something else. You're going to serve one of the two of those things. It's going to be your master. It's going to dominate you. Then Jesus comes to verse number 25. Now, I know we say He comes to verse 25. We come to verse 25 in His teaching. And look at the first word that He uses. A word we use a lot in the Bible, a word we see a lot. Here's what He said. Therefore, He said, in light of all the things that I have just told you, when we're talking about laying up for yourselves treasures on earth, who are we laying up treasures for? We're laying up treasures for ourselves. If our eye is evil and we are concerned with worldly things and we're pulled in all kinds of directions, who are we doing that for? We're doing it for ourselves. And so Jesus says, therefore, in light of all those things and everything that I have told you, you cannot serve God and mammon. Didn't He say that? You're going to serve someone, and someone's going to be ruling over you. So therefore, I say unto you. Do you get that? There's the emphatic statements there that Jesus is going to make. So let me just give you a little 4-point outline here, simplistic in its nature, but I see this verse and the thoughts that are even going to go down in the rest of the verses to be simple verses. And so I want you to see in verse number 25, there are 3 words, and I want you to understand what the definition of it is. So point number 1 is the definition. And that is in the second phrase, I should say. The first one is, therefore I say unto you. Now He's going to give them the message. He's going to give them the main body of His teaching yet again. And here it is. Take no thought. Well, we need to define what that means in this generation in which we live. Because if I come to you and I say to you, don't think about it, what am I trying to say to you? I'm telling you to put it out of your mind and not to think about it, right? And so when you read the Bible here, you might read that and you might say, it says take no thought. And so I am not supposed to think about what I'm going to eat or what I'm going to drink. And I'll get to that in just a moment again as we think about that. And I'm not supposed to think about what I'm going to put on. I'm just supposed to be a robot, mindless. Wouldn't you be mindless if you weren't thinking about those things? Take no thought. That's not what it means, all right? The word thought or taking no thought in your Bible carries the idea. Remember, we're talking, and by the way, Shakespeare used the same terminology. You can read Shakespeare, talked about take no thought. They understood what it means. It's just the word has sort of changed its definition in today's vernacular when we think about thought. But here in your King James Bible, I'm not going to correct the Bible like we said in Sunday school. I'm let the Bible correct me so I can put it in the right context, right? So Jesus isn't telling you not to think about things. That would be crazy. So what does he mean by this? I think you probably already know. The words take no thought literally mean to, this is interesting, to draw in different directions. To be drawn in different directions. How many times have we seen when Jesus started in verse number 19, he talked about going two directions, right? We had the single eye, and then we had the evil eye. That was double vision, right? And so going two directions. We have laying up for ourselves treasure on earth or laying up for ourselves treasure in heaven. We're going in two directions. And so when he said take no thought, what he is saying here is don't be drawn in different directions, okay? Again, bigger even development beyond that, one that you'll understand even better. It is the word to be anxious. Now, how does it make sense? Anxious or to have care, to be troubled with cares, with anxiety, to worry, or to fret. Let's look at this Bible word and see it in some other places. Can we do that tonight? About 3 or 4 other places. Matthew 10 and verse number 19. Matthew 10, verse number 19. So the definition of to draw in different directions, to be anxious about things, to be troubled with cares, or have anxiety and worry and fretting, We're losing our hair because we're worried about things. We're chewing our fingernails. Listen, I'm struggling tonight. I'm just being honest with you. This is tough. You want to know why? I'm all over this verse. You say, oh, you're the kind of take no thought kind of a guy. No, I'm the thought kind of a guy. All right? I'm the over-analyzing kind of a guy. I'm the over-anxious, over-consumed with cares, beyond. I'm like the extreme on the other end of this. This is hard work, okay? I'm just being real with you tonight. But what's consuming you? What's eating away? What are you fretting about? What's going on? Why are we on medication? Because we're worried about things. I'm not criticizing medication, but I'm saying we're medicating the world because people are worried. They're anxious. They have anxiety, and panic attacks. I understand all those things. Had them. Been there. Yeah. That's right. This guy right here. I know all about it. I know what it's like. I know what it feels like. I'm just being straight with you. Is it too much? Should I not do that? You want me to lie to you? I'm telling you, I've had the nights in bed, and I mean the heart is pumping, and you're feeling like, man, I can't do this anymore. I'm just a person. Not everybody may go through that, but I'm telling you, it sometimes happens to the best of us, and sometimes we try to evaluate, and we don't even know where it's coming from, but honestly, there's a root to all of that. And so, people nowadays, they run to the doctor, and doctors putting people on medications, try to control anxiety, and try to control if you're on those things. I'm not criticizing you tonight, but what are we so anxious about? What are we so worried about? What are we so uptight about? What is consuming us? Because when you're anxious and worried and fretting, maybe you don't, but I do. It's the thing that'll consume me. It begins now to control me and to take control of me. What am I doing then? Well, I'm being pulled in two directions. Okay, Matthew 10, verse number 19. Matthew 10, 19. But when they deliver you up, watch, take no thought how or what ye shall speak. For it shall be given you in that same hour what ye shall speak. Anyway, he's talking about here when you get delivered up, in verse number 21, brother will deliver up brother to death, and father and child, and so on and so forth, and you'll be hated of all men for my sake, and they'll pull you before the court system, and so I shouldn't think about what I'm going to say. That's not what he said. You got to put it in the right context. Here's what he said. He said, don't be anxious about that, because he says, I will be with you and I will help you. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of you. That's what he's trying to tell us, Christian. Man, we need to get that. He said, don't be anxious about, don't be worried about, don't lay in bed at night and fret about what if, ISIS comes to America and they tell me to renounce my faith. He said, don't be anxious. That's what he's saying. Don't be anxious about that. Don't worry about that. Will I, won't I? He said, I'll take care of you. I will be with you always. Lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the earth. He said, I'll take care of you. Don't be anxious about it. Well, that's hard to do, God. And God said, I know. He understands. All right. Look at Luke chapter number 10. Luke chapter number 10. I remember when I was a kid, I don't remember what the movie was. There was a movie, a Christian film. They showed it in church, I think, or something. I don't remember it, but I'm pretty sure it was some type of a Christian film. I don't remember what it was. Man, I don't know. We watched that Christian film. It scared me to death. Man, I laid awake at night. I was worried about that film. I was worried the world was going to come to an end. It was crazy. Man, I remember when I was a kid, a Cold War and all these other things going on. I remember laying awake at night thinking the Russians are going to come and they're going to take over. And you remember when those were the big days and Russia's going to, oh man, I remember laying there and worried about that. So it's always been a problem for me, Brother Joe. I'm just admitting it to you. I didn't know it when I was a kid. But it's always, the anxiety. Oh my word. Back then they didn't have medication. You just said, okay, well, they're going to come and take over, I guess. I don't know. Luke 10, verse number 41. And Jesus answered and said unto her, look at this, Martha, Martha, thou art careful and troubled about many things. Do you see that? What's he saying here? He's saying, Martha, you're anxious. You're worried. You're consumed with things. That's really what he's saying. Thou art careful. That doesn't mean that she was like, she was doing that, but every place setting's got to be right, she was doing that, but she was doing it from a level of anxiety. She was anxious. Thou art careful. You're full of care, and you're full of anxiety, and you're full of concern, and troubled. Do you see how those two things go together? The anxiety was troubling her. It was consuming her. And here we have, of course, Mary hath chosen the good part. He said, Mary's not anxious. Mary is with me. Right? Do you see that? Okay. How about 1 Corinthians chapter number 7? 1 Corinthians chapter number 7 and verse number 32. Now here we're talking about being married or remaining unmarried and so on and so forth, but I just thought that the wording was important here because he said in verse number 32, but I would have you without carefulness, without anxiety. Okay? He that is unmarried careth for the things that belong to the Lord. That's, in other words, what he is saying here is not anxious for the things of the Lord. Those are the things that consume him. Are you with me? Those are the things he's concerned with. He careth for the things, he or she careth for the things of the Lord, all right? How he may please the Lord. But he that is married is anxious or concerned or has troubles or cares about that one that he is married to, how he may please his wife. Now, does that make sense, right? I want to care for my wife. He's not just talking about care. He is talking about those are the things that consume him. Husband-wife relationship. And by the way, we should be caring for our wives, and we should be concerned about them and troubled whether or not they're happy, and we worry about them. That's what he's saying. He said those that are unmarried and serving the Lord, and we're this group that he was talking about here that were serving the Lord, he was saying they are concerned about the things of God, but those that are married, he wasn't criticizing that. He was saying, but their concern is for those that they are married to. Okay? Go to Philippians chapter number 4. We've seen these verses, or we're getting to them, or we've studied them, but Philippians chapter number 4. and verse number 6. We haven't gotten this far yet in our Wednesday night Bible study, so we won't spend a lot of time. But what did he say here? He said, be careful for nothing. All right? But in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. He is saying, don't be anxious. Don't be anxious. Don't be anxious about anything. One more, 2 Timothy chapter number 2. Second Timothy chapter number 2 and verse number 4. The Bible says here, no man that warreth entangleth himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who hath chosen him to be a good soldier. That word entangleth is the same idea that we've been developing here. It is just to be pulled in so many directions. No man that warreth is going to be pulled in two directions at one time, entangling himself with the affairs of this life, cares and anxiety, okay? So, that is the definition of take no thought. And I looked up the word anxious. The word anxious means to be greatly concerned, being in painful suspense, to be unquiet. It's an uneasiness of mind occasioned by fear of evil or desire of good. You ever been there? Anxiety. All the things that come along with that, all right? So we're just moving through this. Let's continue on. And so there's the definition, take no thought. So I want you to hear what Jesus is saying here. He said, don't be anxious about these things. Don't be worried about these things. Don't be fretting about these things. Don't be pulled in all of these directions about these things. So then am I not supposed to do anything? Okay, let's answer that. So we see the definition. Number 2, we see the repetition. Verse number 25. Look at what he said, take no thought. Look at verse number 31 with me, therefore take no thought. See that? Look at verse number 34 with me, therefore take no thought. Did you see that? Look at verse number 27 with me, which of you by taking thought? Verse number 28, and why take ye thought? How many of you see that Jesus has not only repeated the same phrase 3 times, but he has alluded to it 5 times in just a few verses? Do you think he was trying to say something important? How many times does he need to say something before it becomes important? All right, so 3 times he has made the matter-of-fact statement, take no thought. Which of you by being anxious about these things, all right? Why would he repeat this? You know why? Here's my conclusion on why he would repeat this. Because Psalms 103, verse number 14 says, for he knoweth our frame, he remembereth that we are dust. He said, I need to tell them not to be anxious about this thing. And then he said, I need to tell them not to be anxious and fret and worry about this thing. And I need to tell them to not be anxious and fret and worry about this thing. He said, I need to keep reminding them because they're just human. I created them. I'm their creator. I know how I created them. I did not create them to be that way. When man was created, he wasn't anxious in the garden about what he was going to eat or what he was going to do. But in the fall, those things got placed on man. And the cares and concern, right? You're going to till. You're going to do this. You're going to work by the sweat of your brow. Do you know what those things bring on? Anxiety and care and concern. So there's the definition. There's the repetition. There's the prohibition in verse number 25. Look at the prohibition. What did he say? He said, take no. Take no. What did he mean by that? It means don't be. He means don't be consumed. Look at the Gospel of Luke chapter number 12. Gospel of Luke chapter number 12 and verse number 26. Luke 12:26 that says, if ye then be not able to do that thing which is least, why take ye thought for the rest? Okay? Are you with me tonight? It's too simplistic. It's pretty simple stuff, isn't it? And so he said, don't be. Out of, this is what I find. Out of verse 25 through verse number 34, well, we have almost, 9, 10 verses there? 25 through 34? It's a lot of verses, right? Do you know that out of all of those verses, that only one verse gives the cure? The rest of the verses are condemnation. Do you know that only one of those verses, out of all of the verses from 25 to 34, you can read them for yourself if you want to later, out of all of those verses, there is one prescription, and every other verse is a problem? How many of you see the commercials where you get a prescription from the pharmacy and you read all of that stuff? We never read it, right? You see a commercial, you hear one on the radio, right? And they're may cause, your left toe to go numb and your right finger to stop working and so on and so forth. But, your eye will be better. Well, I trade like 5 good body parts for one body part. You know what you really ultimately end up doing? You kind of got to make a choice. Which body part's more important to me? I suppose I could do without my pinky finger bending, at 180 degrees if my eyeball will work all right, so I'll take this medication. That's the gospel truth, isn't it? I mean, you like gamble with other body parts to try to fix something nowadays, right? And so, you know what you have? You have a list of problems, and that prescription only fixes one thing. Huh? It only fixes, and it doesn't even fix that most of the time, And so you have all these people, and they're hospitalized, and we've all seen this happen. They have this, and this. I just went through this with my sister, and she has all these problems, and so we're asking the doctor, well, how did this happen, and how did that happen? You know what the doctor said? The medication that she was taking. Well, you folks put her on that medication. Yes, we know, and these are what the side effects could be. Well, yes, and now that she has those, and so now you've had to fix that problem, and now you got to put her on more other kinds of medication because you just fixed that. And you don't win. I'm not against medication. I'm just saying there's a lot of problem listed there, isn't there? This is kind of like reading one of those prescription bottles. There's a whole lot of problem here from verses 25 through verse number 34, and there's only one prescription, right? Did you know that there's only one prescription? Here's your prescription verse. I'll give it to you and let you study it and read it. It's verse number 33. That's your prescription verse from Dr. Jesus, the great physician. He's going to tell you what the answer is to all those things. And so, I want you to see under the prohibition, let's see, what do we have here? We've got about 2 things here that I want you to see. Number 1, I want you to see the expression. So he said, take no thought. He said, take no. Don't worry about it. Here's the expression. When these things, what things? Let's look at them. He said, take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat, or what ye shall drink, nor yet for your body, what ye shall put on. Did you see that? So what's he talking about? He's talking about food, clothes. Yeah, I even see our health listed in there a little bit, ironically speaking. Our health in there, your body. He's even going to talk about it in verse number 27 again. And so you see here, what you drink, what you put on. How many of you tonight could be real honest with the pastor and say, food, drink, and clothing are very important to me? Oh, yes, absolutely, right. You're wearing clothes. Most of you probably ate a meal this afternoon. You're hoping to have something to drink after the service, or you already did, or you're thirsty right now. Something or other. How many of you thought about those things through the day? I'm hungry. I'm thirsty. I've got to get ready for church. I've got to get dressed. I need to get, we did those things this morning. These are things. So these are natural occurrences in our life. Well, tomorrow morning, I don't want you to think about food. That should be pretty easy for you. Don't think about it all day. Don't have a drink of water. As a matter of fact, you'll pardon me being just candid with you, but don't even think about clothes. Just go ahead and go on to work. In what? You figure it out. I suppose if you're going to wear some clothes to work, I wouldn't really think that much about it. Just, whatever sort of falls out of the drawer, whatever you got out of bed in. I don't know, wear your pajamas to work, I guess. Don't take no thought about it. Well, that's what Jesus is saying, isn't it? Don't think about it. It's not really that big of a deal. It doesn't matter whether or not you eat for the next 3 weeks. Miss Jill, don't worry about feeding your kids. Don't take no thought for them either. She's good with that. Brother Chris ain't good with it, but she's good with it. Just don't take no thought for it. No. Here's an expression of what he is trying to say. When we think about it, these things, food and clothing and shelter, and expand the list out, okay? He's giving us a general synopsis of very important things, but the list is very big. When these things cause me anxiety, worry, fretting, care, concern, they pull me in their direction. Do you know what happens? They sidetrack me from what is important spiritually speaking, and I become consumed about those things instead of about my spiritual life, i.e. we will do things to take care of food, clothing, housing, ... and we will neglect the spiritual areas of our life where we ought to be growing. Are you with me tonight? Does that make sense? Yes, preacher, that does make perfect sense that way. What do you mean by this is where you will put your time and your effort and your care and your concern and your worry will be on all of these things because I've got to take care of my family and I've got to do all these things. Please, I'm not criticizing you. I'm not condemning you. I'm not saying that that is wrong, but what I'm saying is when you become anxious and worried and that consumes you, it's going to mark it down because Jesus said it. I'm only repeating what Jesus said. You're going to get sidetracked spiritually. Why? Because no man can serve two masters. Did you miss that? Do you see how he develops that thought even further? Because you're going to serve this master because this master provides you with all the things you're concerned with. All your anxiety. And so I'm going to serve that master, but now wait a minute. I'm supposed to be serving the King of Kings, and I'm suffering spiritually, and I'm not anxious about those things, but I'm very anxious and worried about all of these things. We ought to be worried about our spiritual life. We don't spend it. Now, I'm not talking be anxious and worried, but what I'm saying is that, here it is. Ready? You will gain no advantage in excessive worry over these things. You ready for the next statement? They gain the advantage over you. Do you know that you... Man, preacher, stop preaching to yourself. You gain no advantage by worrying about these things, fretting and having anxiety about these things. You normally, they say, what is it, 75%? It might even be higher than that of the things we worry about never come to pass. 75%, and I think the number's higher. The 80, it might even be in a 90. It's a high number that if you evaluate yourself in your life and you say, these are the things I worry about, find out how many times those things come to pass. It's rare. You say, oh no, the things I worry about, I mean, they always come to pass. I don't think that's true. So here's the thing. I'm worried those things are taking advantage of me now. Now those things control me. I'm not controlling them. Because here's the thing. Do you know most of the things that you and I worry about we can't control anyways? We worry about our health. How many of you can control your health? Brother Doug is sitting here, and health food and all that kind of stuff, and I fall that way 95% of the time, trying to eat right and do right, and I know many others in the room, it's not. I know it's not about the quantity. It's about the quality of our life or quantity or whatever it is. But I think we ought to do the right things. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying go to McDonald's and eat like it doesn't really matter. That's foolishness. That is a bunch of foolishness. I'm not criticizing those places. I'm just make a statement. But what I'm saying is, so we worry and we fret about. Okay, I worry about my health. Well, you don't, but I'm getting older, and so I worry about my health. But honestly, Brother Norm, I can't really do anything about it. Everybody's afraid of cancer. I'm going to sit around, I'm going to worry, I'm going to fret about cancer. The fact of the matter is me worrying about it doesn't give it or probably more susceptible to giving it to me than it ever does from stopping me from getting it. One of these days I'm going to go, I'll be honest with you. I've read something in the book of Job, mentioned it here before, that has always struck me as odd. And I probably should have put it in the sermon here, maybe we will in the coming weeks. But there is a statement in the book of Job where Job basically, after his cattle is gone and his kids are gone and all that, Do you know that there's a statement, and it's not very far into the book of Job, and do you know that Job said the things that I was worried about, the things that I was anxious about, they came to pass? I honestly believe that we can cause things to happen in our life by excessively worrying or having anxiety about them. And I'm not saying our thoughts cause, don't misunderstand me. What I'm saying, though, is if something consumes you, don't you gravitate towards that and you spend all of your time trying to thwart some wicked or bad or some odd thing from happening, and sometimes we are the cause of that thing. Has that ever come to you? I'm just telling you, it's in the book of Job. You can look at it for yourself. I don't remember, it's something along the lines of, I probably should turn to it so that you don't misunderstand me, but he basically is saying those things that I was worried about would come to pass, have come to pass. The context in which I read it is Job was worried about losing his children. He was worried about losing his finances. He was worried about losing his health. And he said, all those things came to pass. And I think that when I read it, I basically say, he says, I brought those things on in my life. Wow. And by the way, excessive worrying can kill your health. It'll destroy you. It'll take years off your life and kill you. People go through it all the time. And so, but what I'm trying to get at, that's why Jesus says, take no thought. He's not saying don't think about it. He's not saying don't concern yourself with it. But what he's saying is that you don't gain an advantage. Those things get an advantage over you, and then you only begin to live by those things. Those things begin to consume you. Those things begin to rule you. And Paul said in 1 Corinthians 6, verse number 12, I'm not going to be brought under the bondage of anything. Okay? Note the things that are listed are necessities, and they are. But if not careful, we will forget the spiritual for the material. Are you with me? Let me ask you a question. What concerns you? What concerns you? Is it material? Is it temporal? Or is it spiritual? Are you concerned with where you are spiritually? Or are you more concerned with where you are monetarily, materially, and any number of other things? Where's more of your anxiety? Where's more of your care? You say, I'm not anxious in either area. All right, where are you more? Where do you care more about? You know, every one of us have to answer those questions. It's sad that I had to, and it was hard. I'm just being honest with you, go to the funeral home today and look at a 55-year-old man laying in a casket. 55 sounds pretty young, especially to a lot of people in the room. A 55-year-old man that I may be wrong, but I don't think that I'm wrong because I worked for the company for several years. It's been in business for a lot of years. I know the owner very well. I personally worked in his home. I knew him and his wife. I knew his family very well. We had a lot of conversations. I knew this man very well. Matter of fact, I bought a car from him. And it drove, of all the thoughts that I had, I thought about buying that car from him, and that car drove us back and forth to church so many times. We lived 35 miles from our church at that time, and I had to drive all the way into the other side of Auburn Hills from Hazel Park to get to church every single service, and we did it. And we drove that big Lincoln Town Car. I did own a Lincoln at one time, by the way. It was an old 1990 Lincoln Town Car. Man, I just remember driving that car, and he sold me that car, really gave me the car. But here's a man that's 55 years old and probably, I might be wrong, probably died a millionaire. Very successful business. Multi-million-dollar a year business. I know, I worked there. Back in the days when I worked there, they were turning well over $500,000 a month in business and beyond. And that was a long time ago. That was 10 years ago. It's grown substantially since then. He amassed a pretty good life for himself. And those were the things that he was anxious about. Those were the things that he was concerned about. That's what he spent his life on. But the end of all man is right there. I walked into that room, and I'll be honest with you, I was a little heartbroken, and here's why. Because someday your preacher's probably going to die if the Lord doesn't come back, whether sooner or later, no matter what it is, and more than likely, not a third of that many people will probably come. I'll guarantee you, I got there 17 minutes after the viewing started. 17 minutes after it started, I couldn't get in the room. The room was bigger than this. There was probably 250 people there, and it had just started at 17 minutes before I rolled into the parking lot. And people were coming. You couldn't move. You could not move. Had a lot of friends. A lot of people that knew him in the world in which he was involved with there. And so here he is, and I talked with his son a little bit, and I just briefly with his brother, his only brother, and they were business partners. Dad had turned the business over to the two of them in the last couple of years, even though Dad's still alive and works there, and is really in his 80s, and he's in great health, and his dad works there. But I saw all of that, and I thought, because I know I spent time in conversation with him. I know some of the things that he went through. He told me. He had a lot of anxiety, a lot of anxiousness. And not a one of it I'm not pleased. Not any of it, as far as I know, had anything to do with spiritual. What's all that anxiety doing for him now? What's all that care, all that wealth, all that really... I remember when I worked there, you know, we used to look at him and be like, oh man, he lives in a nice house. I want to live in a big house like that. He lived in a big house. He drove a Lincoln. He had a good life. A good life. And he was anxious and concerned about those things, and it used to... But I spent some time talking with his brother. And his brother's words were, he's in a better place now. And my heart went right here. I thought, I wish you could prove that to me. If he is, I hope someone gave him the gospel. I don't have any idea. But he's not in pain anymore. And my heart went down here, and I thought, I don't know about that. And he said, well, you know, his brother-in-law, he passed away not that long ago, and so they're up there. And he said, and they're probably having a Bud Light in heaven. And I got in the car, and by the way, I worked for this man for a long time. He probably drank a 12-pack every single day before he left work. You think I'm joking. A 12-pack would have been a light day. Every day before he left work. And then he would drive home. Great guy. Friendly, loving, was a functioning alcoholic. Him and his dad were probably best friends. But his brother knew him as a guy that's going to get to heaven and have a Bud Light. That's what you're remembered for. Sounds like his anxiety and his care and his concern was on worldly and material. His kids are going to get it. Oh, and some of the kids in the room are like, man, I wish my dad was leaving me something like that. But in all honesty, they don't even have their father. I'd like to have my dad. That's just me. That's pretty sad. A lot of care and a lot of our anxiety has nothing to do with spirituality. What am I going to wear? What's the next greatest and latest? What's this and what's that? I'm not against any of those things. I'm just saying, if that drives you in life, it's material. And Jesus said, why are you anxious about that? Why is that consuming you? That's the expression, but look at the exemption, and I'll close. Jesus is not teaching a careless attitude, and don't misunderstand me right here, where you're going to say, well, the preacher just gave us an exemption to not be concerned about anything. I don't have to work. I don't have to feed my family. Well, Chris, you can quit UPS because I'm not supposed to be anxious about how I'm going to feed my family or pay my bills, and so you can just quit all that. And Miss Jill, you don't have to do your job anymore, and you guys can just live in your house and don't worry because God's going to take care of us. I'm not going to not be rude or crude, but you would be fools to do that because God never would do that. Because why would He teach something that would be contrary to Scripture in which He has written about? He that doesn't work doesn't eat. Right? Man does not live by bread alone, But that doesn't mean that, the Bible says this, bodily exercise profiteth little. It never said don't do it. It just said it profiteth little when it comes to your spiritual life. It's less important. Understand when you read the Bible that sometimes we get this idea that Jesus is saying we shouldn't do these things. No, He's not saying you shouldn't do those things. He's saying those things ought not to consume you, but you do need bread. You do need water. You do need clothing. You do need shelter. You do need to take care of your family. As a matter of fact, I have verses that I found in the Bible where it talks about parents laying up for the children. God's not against that. It's in the book of Corinthians. And I'm not talking about leaving them a big bank account and leaving them all kinds of stuff. There is a spiritual application there, but you can leave your kids something. But what he is teaching us is don't become consumed. Don't be so anxious about, I have to leave my kids an inheritance, that you leave them spiritually bankrupt. And not only do you leave them spiritually bankrupt, you'll leave yourself spiritually bankrupt in the process. Because in all honesty, when all is said and done, the only thing I have from my father is a Bible. Someone may die and may leave their son $1 million, and that person will die, or that son will blow that $1 million. I can promise you, I can get into the treasure trove of a Bible back there, and I can learn things that will spiritually help me in my everyday walk, even though I don't have a bank account with $1 million in it. I'd love to have $1 million, but I'll go ahead and take that because the $1 million will go. The moth and rust will corrupt what I do buy with it. The thief will try to be getting after me, as will the IRS and everybody else, right? All of that stuff is going to be gone. But you can't take away my spirituality. I'm not against you working. I'm not against you having nice clothes. I'm not against you doing nice. I'm not against you driving a nice car. Neither is Jesus. He is not talking about your work. He is talking about your worry. Definition, repetition, prohibition, composition. Here's the composition of it. Is not life more than meat and the body more than raiment? He said, aren't there things that are more important? That's what he was saying in the context and where, and we'll sort of develop that out as we'll see how the birds get fed. No birds are on medication. It's getting cold out. I wonder if they're up in the tree going, I wonder how I can eat. You say, well, they're birds. They don't think like that. How do you know a bird thinks? Bird brain? We got a few of those around, and maybe you do know how birds think. I don't. But I know this. There's been many a night that I've been anxious about things. Didn't have anything to do with God. I'm not saying that they weren't important. My health is important. I get anxious about my health. My finances are important. They're important to me. They're important to my family. I get anxious about that. But I don't want those things to be my driving force. And spiritually, when I look at my life, here's what I say. I've done really good because I worried about these things, so those were the things that drove me to do more and more because I wanted to provide more for my family. But spiritually, when I evaluate my life, I am bankrupt. Would it really be worth it? That's a question you have to answer. Now, I gave you a piece of paper. Now, what did you write down? You put down the things you were worried about. Are they spiritual? Well, that's awful in your face. They don't make any never mind to me. I'm not going to show you what my list is, and it's more than 3. Huh? Are they spiritual? Or do they have to do with, I'm worried about whether or not my car is going to get me home? By the way, I'm not saying don't think about that. But I'm saying what you wrote on that list, if you wrote down the things truly that are on the top of your mind, those are the things that you're anxious. Those are the things that are concerning you. Those are the things that are pulling you in their direction. Maybe you're good and you wrote down, I'm worried whether or not I am pleasing Jesus. Ooh, that should be good on the top of our list. I'm worried about whether or not I prayed enough today. Did I read my Bible enough? Did I do enough for Jesus? There's a list of 4 or 5 things right there. Just take all those other things, compartmentalize them, and just put them down here. Don't fret and be anxious about them. Take care of them. Be diligent. But put the spiritual priorities up here, because here's why. He'll tell you the prescription right there. I won't argue with you about it, and I won't try to tell you that if I live that way, God won't take care of me, because then God would be a liar, and I don't serve a lying God. I don't believe it. I don't know how He takes care of all the things. I've just seen Him do it. If you just would worry about me, I'll take care of that. You do right, and I'll take care of it. Father, help us tonight. Lord, our worry, our anxiety, our fears, oh man, 100 directions. We're pulled 100 directions a day by people and by things and by situations. And Lord, I just pray that tonight your people maybe would just get, Lord, a sort of a fresh vision about spirituality. I maybe have said more than I should have said tonight, even from a personal standpoint. Lord, I just feel like we were going in a direction that you were carrying us, and I know me. I don't know me as well as you know me. You know the things I worry about. You know the things I worry about even while I'm standing here preaching. And if I'm not careful, my mind will get pulled in those directions. God, I don't want to be a man that is unstable and be double-minded. I want to be single-minded. And I'll take care of those things I need to take care of, but I also need to learn to trust that you're going to take care of me. So God, help us tonight. Could we stand together? Piano, play some verse of a song.